April the 18th, Rubio himself, he stood on a tarmac and just emphatically with staccato voice said, we will walk in days, not weeks, if we can't get this thing narrowed down. He said it again on the 27th of April. Trump said it on May the 4th. And then here on May the 16th, you have Rubio saying, well, we'll continue to engage with this. We're going to continue to talk, etc. And top of everything he had said, here's something that Tammy Bruce, his spokeswoman, May the 1st is the date that she said this. And watch how emphatically she says where they were, not where they would go, but where they were on May 1st.
Our style will change. The methodology of how we contribute to this will change in that we will not be the mediators. That is what I mentioned on Tuesday, and the nature of how this would change is we certainly were still committed to it and will help and do what we can, but we are not going to fly around the world at the drop of a hat to mediate meetings. That it is now between the two parties, and now is the time that they need to present and develop concrete ideas about how this conflict is going to end. It's going to be up to them.
Listen, here's the problem. So you said that declarative statement on May the 1st, and now May the 16th, at the drop of a hat, you did fly off around the world. You went to Istanbul. You went with the Secretary of State himself, flew off. And then even after these talks ended, instead of saying, all right, that's it, we tried everything, now it's on you, he's still saying we're going to continue to mediate. We're going to continue to try to talk. We're going to bring the two sides together. And look, as far as it goes, there's nothing wrong per se with following that course of action. If you want to say we want to help bring the parties together, that's fine if you're going to try and mediate something. But when you say authoritatively on the 1st of the month that you're out, not going to be, but are out, you saw, we're out of it. We're no longer going to do the mediation. And then you do exactly what you said you wouldn't do. Where's your word? Where's the value of what you have to say? Who's going to believe you? Because there's two different parties here, three different parties that won't believe you. One is the European Union. They see you say that, and then they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to anything the Americans say because they don't mean any of it. So we're just going to continue to push in ways that we think is good, what we want. And I think that there is some validity to the concern that the European side doesn't want an end to the war. They want it to continue on. Their actions say that. Whatever their words are is inconsequential. When the actions and the words don't match, we always go with the actions. And all they're talking about is continuing the war. Obviously, the Ukraine side, Zelensky. Remember, back to that infamous explosion in the Oval Office at the end of February. Zelensky said whatever he wanted to do. He went to Europe and had applause and all this background stuff. That we keep saying all these things. We had the Rubio from April all the way through saying, you know, we're days away from walking. We're days away from walking. The president, and then now here we are. May the 16th, and we're not walking anywhere. And now then we just have an open-ended deal. We're just going forward. So Zelensky's not going to listen to anything we say either. He's going to continue to do what he wants, which is to push for the unattainable, politically, diplomatically, militarily. And as I point out every time, and I just need to do it here because it's so central importance, every day he does that, more people die. Now, I have said previously that by pushing these things off and to ignore the diplomatic off-ramp that exists, the ugly deal as it is now, it's going to get uglier the longer we go. So that's already playing out right here. And not merely it's uglier, but more of his own people are paying the ultimate sacrifice. They're dying in large numbers. They're doing it every day. And there is no hope whatsoever of reversing this ever. Now, unfortunately, Zelensky's not the only one in that delusional mindset. Also, the Europeans. I've talked about a lot of the leaders there, and you saw Starmer making a comment from earlier today. Here is Sir Michael Clarke on the British television explain to you how that actually they're probably in a good position because this is a stalemate anyway.
There's something of a diplomatic charade going on in Istanbul today. in a sense, it's all orchestrated by the Russians, who are trying to avoid any real commitment to a ceasefire. So they're playing for time, as we knew they would from last week onwards, and the international community can't really do very much about it. So now as we get into the campaign season, the Russians will push even harder. And so they're making some gains around Lyman. They're making some gains around Toretsk, but the Ukrainians are pushing back. The Ukrainians are still holding Pokrovsk, even though the Russians have tried to get all the way around it, but they still can't. And the Russians themselves still can't take Chasiv Yar, which is a really important centre for going northwards to take the whole of the Donbass. Here's the key thing. Over a year ago, in February last year, February 2024, the Russians took Avdiivka. That was a really important strategic gain for them, a really important strategic loss for the Ukrainians. Over a year later, 15 months later, they're only 30 miles further on. They still haven't taken Pokrovsk. That tells you all you really need to know about what's going on in the war. It's a bit of a stalemate.
Yeah, that doesn't tell you all you need to know. And I'm going to tell you what you really need to know. And part of it was revealed in the New York Times a couple of days ago when they explained that, you know what, actually, there has been a pretty sizable amount of territory that was lost. Gary, if you can throw that full screen up on there, that's the one. Thank you. They heading into these negotiations, the New York Times said that Russia is taking inches on the battlefield, but demanding miles in talks. But when you read down into the bottom part of that article, into the details, it says that over the past 16 months, as Russian forces seized the initiative, Moscow took 1,827 square miles of Ukraine, an area smaller than Delaware, according to the dead. So he wants to minimize that anywhere. But then they continue on. In wars of attrition, incremental gains can presage a breakthrough if the losing side runs out of troops and ammunition and the defensive lines finally collapse. This may be what Russia's counting on. Ukraine, whose wartime population is less than a quarter of Russia's, has lost many soldiers holding the line. Well, yeah, no kidding. See, that's why, and we've had Andrei Martyanov, we've had Colonel Jacques Beau, former NATO official or officer. Everybody that understands the issues of war, I think Commodore Jeremy from former UK Commodore, they all say Russia is operating on a different strategy than the West. They're not primarily focused on taking territory, though they are, as you see, 1,800 square miles, not an insignificant amount of territory. But what the article didn't even talk about, it talked about what the Russians' alleged casualties were, which were significant. And I'm sure they are significant, though probably not as high as what was claimed in there. But they didn't even address on the Ukraine side. And it is substantially higher. And it is catastrophically high. And even they had to concede that occasionally you can wear down another side. Russia's fighting an attritional war. We've been talking about this. Alex Vershinin at the Royal United Services Institute published an article a year ago that laid out in graphic detail. Russia is fighting a war of attrition. They're not fighting a war of maneuver the way the West does, because their objective is not merely to capture territory. Their objective is to create security on their western flank by demilitarizing their enemy so that they don't have the capacity to threaten them in the future, ergo demilitarization. And they'll either get that done militarily through a voluntary demobilization of their troops down to some given number, or they'll kill them all. And that's what they are actually physically doing. They're continuing to go down that path. And listen, so when you have guys like Michael Clark and some of these other folks and some of these heads of state, or Zelensky himself, they keep telling you over and over, we'll just keep fighting. We'll keep going. We're going to put sanctions. We're going to force Russia with economic pain and economic pressure to submit to what we want and to end the war on terms we have, which, by the way, they almost never quantify. When they say a just and lasting peace, and they understand that some of the territory will go back, apparently the most they ever contemplate is the current line of contact right now. And then even according to General Kellogg, his great plan the other day was that they would then withdraw 15 kilometers back. And so they would have this big 30-kilometer zone between them, which would completely obliviate everything that Russia has been paying this price to get while they're in the strong position. Obviously, they're not going to do that. Nobody would. We would definitely not do that. If we were in the position, superiority militarily, I assure you, we would never give in to the other side, the lower side, and let them call the terms. So it blows my mind, and it just is irrational as it can be for us on the losing side to think that we're going to get them to do this, which we wouldn't even do if we were on the superior side. So everything that we're talking about here leads to one conclusion only, and that they're trying to extend the war. That they are delusional, that they think that maybe sometime in the future, years down the line, that Russia will slow down. And I don't even know what they would think that was going to accomplish if Russia did slow down and they ran out of steam or something. That still doesn't get the other side. That doesn't affect your side of the calculation, which is you don't have enough manpower to operate. You don't have enough ammunition, weapons, or artillery pieces, tanks, etc. Certainly not aircraft. By the way, another F-16 was lost by the Ukraine side yesterday. That makes at least 3. Obviously, they never made any difference. So everywhere you want to look, it's just delusion. And every day that you see more Ukrainian men pay the ultimate price with their lives, they'll never get it back. And so that's why I say several times it is immoral, it is irrational, it is illogical for the West to continue going down this side.